So there are massive changes that have been proposed to the undergraduate system. For instance, after class 12th, the method that was followed or presumably followed was cut-off marks. Some universities had entrance tests. But now the UGC has proposed a common entrance test for all universities. To talk about this, as to whether this is the right way forward in its present form as a reform or not, I have with me the former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, Mr. Dinesh Singh. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for joining us. First of all, your opinion on these changes, proposed changes.
Well, Sanket, I must tell you that in principle, it's a good idea to reform the admissions process. And that was what the National Education Policy Committee had in mind when they recommended this matter, that they could consider universities should consider a national admissions test. In principle, it is a good idea and it is required. But, as usual, the devil lies in the details. I have seen no evidence in India so far, not just vis-a-vis this test that is about to be launched, but even in other tests, national tests of all kinds, any deep academic or scholarly talk and thinking behind those tests. Let me just give you an example. If you look at the IIT entrance exams, the one major upshot of these exams has been that over the years, they have messed up entirely our school education system. It's completely gone to the dogs. Nobody has given thought to this. There is grave danger that if we do this test also along the same lines, this is going to harm school education to the hilt. India needs to be wary. You can't have a double whammy. As it is, whenever students start preparing for IITs or other exams, they don't seem to pay much attention to what happens in their school exams, school studies. It isn't so much the exams as the fact that they don't pay attention to studies, to knowledge, to creativity. And the IIT entrance exam has consistently been a creativity killer. I have seen no correlation between those who do really well in the entrance exam for the IITs and how they perform in the IITs. I have only anecdotal evidence, but gathered over a large number of years, talking to many colleagues. Let's not do the same thing with this exam. That's my worry. I think we need to think carefully and do this in a very reasoned, rational, and productive way.
So, Mr. Singh, if I may ask you, do you feel that it has not been done in a reasoned, rational way? And this is not reform, but merely a change? And the results of that may be catastrophic?
Yes, Sanket. So my thing is that all I have heard so far are the modalities of the test. Look, the real thing is what sort of questions are going to be asked? What is the methodology behind asking those questions? Will they test ability in a genuine way? I have no evidence of that. We are just leaving it to the National Testing Agency. I respect them and they have a hard task before them, but where is the evidence so far? Maybe they have something up their sleeves which I'm unaware of, and maybe that's the way it should be. But my worry is all our past records, including the NEET exam, none of them betray any confidence on my part.
I think that's a very important input that perhaps the UGC must look into. But, Mr. Singh, if not this, you're saying in principle you're not opposed to the idea of this change or reform. What are those key things that you feel need to be done? For instance, when you have a common entrance test for any university, it does not take into consideration certain specific areas in which certain expertise is required. For instance, right now, there are some universities who are carrying out entrance tests for specific courses. So do you think that this specific nature will go out of the window once you have a very common form of examination?
What little I've gathered since yesterday, probably they're going to make some provisions that will take into account specializations. But let me tell you something, Sanket. All through my school years, I wanted to be a physicist. I was good at math, but I was also good at physics and I wanted to be a physicist. I suddenly, when I entered college, I changed my mind and became a mathematician. Now, my point is this. you're going to test someone for, say, biology, but the bloke may decide I really want to do history. I mean, this is too early to allow people to decide specializations. That's the other mistake they're making. I don't endorse that idea. What they have to look for is a certain ability to be creative, to think rationally, have a fair degree of general knowledge of the creative kind. I have seen no evidence in any kind of test that India has offered in the past that would betray that. And you've seen our performance in the PISA exams, the global testing exam, which tests these basic skills of students. India has performed abysmally so far. And so we need to think, where will this take school education? I'm sincerely worried. I'm not saying that this test is going to be a disaster. It may well turn out to be a great idea, but until I have the details, I need to be cautious.
Okay. Mr. Singh, there are some comments on the COO app also that many students, many concerned parents seem to be raising, and let's see if you can answer some of those questions. So Gaurav on the COO app says that some boards are more generous than others in marking, and this gives their students an unfair advantage over others. In effect, he's suggesting that a common entrance exam is actually going to be good because it will take care of this quote-unquote anomaly. How would you respond to this, Mr. Singh? Because, the cutoffs have been obnoxious. I mean, how can one reasonably expect to get enrolled in a Delhi University college with a 100% cutoff?
Sanket, it's not a question of cutoffs. It's a question of how do you go about getting yourself assessed. I mean, just take I'm sorry, I keep harking back to the IIT entrance exam.
Sure.
Become a convenient whipping boy, but I'm compelled to do that. Just look at the exams. They don't take into account any board performances. So let's leave the board thing aside for a moment, whether a board gives you good marks or not. Have you seen the merciless way in which students prepare for the IIT entrance? Have you seen the mad pressure that everybody puts on them? And is this a small number of students? It's a large number, very large number. And it is messing up things completely. It's not helping India's knowledge creativity. We have to think about this. Let's not fall into the same trap again with this. So yes, there is a genuine concern. Some boards have been very liberal with their marks. But in trying to rectify that, let's not add another problem. There are ways out. I mean, look, even when I was Vice Chancellor, I was working hard on creating a rational system that will take into account the excesses that certain boards indulge in. I got distracted towards the last 1.5 years of my tenure with other issues that compelled me to withdraw the 4-year program, and that got left by the wayside. We had made enormous progress, and I can tell you what little we had thought about that issue, it can be sorted out, and it can be done in a gentle way at a national level to ensure that even if you come to us through your board exam, what we take into account as your performance would be something whose standards we will have prescribed and judged through random testing. And at the national level. And then the boards will have to perk up. You could, let me just very quickly, if you have half a minute, illustrate. So suppose I give a math exam which is set by a certain board. One question set in the right way comes to the board from the central body. And they must put that into the question paper. And we at the central level announce that performance through that one question. I'm just giving you an illustration. And every university can look at that performance rather than the entire marks of the maths paper. And it'll give them a very good idea. That puts away, a lot of the other stress that you have, that this is a board exam, then I have to prepare for these other things. It can be blended very easily. Maybe they have thought about it. I'm not sure. As I said, our track record, and I'm not talking about the track record of the last 1, 2, 3, 5 years. Last over 40 decades. Years, 50 years, we're just messing up entrance exams. My fear is if you look at India from outer space one day, it will look like one big entrance examination center.
Mr. Singh, my final question, this also comes from a viewer, Parang, and he writes, are we cutting or increasing competition through common tests among students? How would you respond?
Well, on the face of it, we're probably going to increase competition.
Why do you think, Mr. Singh, my final question, that these examinations are creativity killers?
Sanket, it depends on the way you ask questions. I haven't seen any deep scholarship, academic or practical. And scholarship needs to be practical also. There's no point being a scholar in some ethereal sense. The ancient Indian Mimamsa school of philosophy says so categorically, knowledge without action is meaningless. So if you have a body of scholars and some scholarship material, that should be very practice-oriented. And I haven't seen anything like that when it comes to testing creativity and such things in our students.
Well, Mr. Singh, thank you so much. I think these are valuable inputs. Let's see what this CUET has to offer, and they must certainly factor in the points that you have made. Otherwise, it could very well be a creativity killer, as you're putting it. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Singh.
Thank you. Thank you.